Welcome and thank you for standing by. For the duration of today's conference, all participants will be in a listen-only mode. I'd like to inform all parties that today's conference is being recorded. If you have any objections, you may disconnect at this time. I would now like to turn the conference over to Wendy Peebles. Thank you. You may begin.
Thank you, operator. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Wendy Peebles, Survey Statistician, Census Bureau Economic Management Division. Today we have two subject matter experts from the Economic Management Division who will discuss census data tools to include the Census Business Builder, COVID-19 Data Hub, and Census API. We believe these tools will provide an excellent resource for your business operations. So thank you again for joining. Just want to let you know that the Q&A will occur at the end of today's webinar, and you may submit your questions to all panelists. Lastly, we value your feedback, so please complete the evaluation form at the end as it assists in planning future webinars. I would like to introduce our speakers for today, and just want to say that this is part one of a part two series. We will offer the second part two webinar on Thursday of this week at 2 p.m. So to share with you a little information on our first speaker, Ms. Sephora Appel is a program analyst in the Economic Management Division here at the Census Bureau. In her current role, Barbara co-leads development and dissemination of the innovative tools Census Business Builder, a data access tool that presents selected demographic, business, and other data in a user-friendly, map-based interface. She conducts training on a variety of Census Bureau data products and services. Barbara has extensive experience with program management, change management, business development, marketing, communications, and outreach, having spent 16 years in the private sector. Barbara has a strong advocacy and grassroots experience working with groups to increase stakeholder interest and participation. And she has held numerous leadership roles and is a volunteer with many organizations to help them achieve their mission and goals. Barbara is the recipient of 2 Department of Commerce Bronze Medals. She has received Special Act Awards and Certificate of Appreciation. She holds a professional certificate in business analysis from Duke University and an MBA from the University of Maryland Global Campus, a bachelor's degree from Goucher College, and a certificate on business in the European context from the University of Antwerp in Belgium. So that is our first speaker. And next we have Mr. Andy Haight, who is an economist and serves as a data product and data user liaison in the Economic Management Division here at Census. With over 30 years of service at the Bureau, Andy advises on economic data products and conducts data user training and outreach for the Economic Census and the Census Bureau's other monthly, quarterly, and annual economic survey program. He co-leads the team that built the COVID-19 Data Hub and an interactive platform that presents data on the coronavirus pandemic. He is also the lead designer and coordinates development of the Census Business Builder, which I mentioned to you earlier. So Mr. Haight holds a bachelor's degree in economics from Syracuse University and has a master's certificate in project management from George Washington University. So I'm excited to learn more about these tools. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Barbara.
Thank you, Wendy, and thank you, everyone, for joining us this afternoon. I will start by going to the Census Business Builder. Andy will then continue with the COVID-19 Hub and the Census API. And if you just give me a sec, I just need to turn off my camera. The Census Business Builder is one of the innovative tools of the Census Bureau. What makes it innovative is because we have strived to make it easier to access, to use, and to essentially understand. It's simple steps, 3 simple steps that we decided to have. You choose to get into it via the top industries that happen to be the most common types of industries that people want to explore, or you can actually search the entire NIC system by typing the industry that you're looking for. But for our example, I'm going to say that with the professional business services, I'm going to choose, let's say, consulting, and we're we're based out of Washington, D.C., so I typically go to Fairfax County, so that's what I will send you today. So as you can see so far, it's a few things have come up. One, the ease of use, and two is essentially three steps. You choose your industry, your sub-industry, and your geography. Here you can choose to either create your report, this is what makes it FIBO compliant, or go to the map to explore the interface. This tool has a variety of data sets, including demographic, socioeconomic, and housing data from the American Community Survey. It has business data from the county business patterns, non-employer statistics, economic census, and survey of business owners. It has imports and exports data from the International Trade Program. It has workforce data from the quarterly workforce indicators, and it has building permits data from the Building Permit Survey. It allows you to upload your own data by choosing my variables. I know I'm going too fast talking about the types of data we have, but I'm going to go a little bit more detail in all of those. We also have data from the U.S. Department of Agriculture. The census has a lot of data, except for the agriculture data, for which we partner with USDA. And we have the hires by educational attainment from QWI, the employment and related data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the quarterly census of employment and wages, QEEW. So what we've done with CBV is put as much data as we think the user would like to see, enough to get them interested, and easy access to get them to use it. So the main features of this interface are we have the geographic levels of state, metro, county, city, town, zip code, and tract. One of the things, as I mentioned earlier, innovation-wise of Census Business Builder is that we're continuously updated. And having added metro is one of the latest updates of CBV. We added the metro areas just this year, and a lot of what we do for Census Business Builder is based on feedback. So as we have shown this tool in the last few years, we've always asked our users, is there anything that you would like to see that you don't see yet? And this is what we have created, essentially with user input. So this is what a metro area would look like. So I'm in the Washington, D.C. area. And what that does is it grabs the geographies that make the metro based on the geographic selection that you have. As easily as you can toggle back and forth, you can actually go to here if you wanted to explore another state or another geography. Say, for instance, that you want to see what Tampa, Florida is about. You can stay in metro, or you can go to county. So if I want to go to, well, no, not Tampa County. I wanted to go to Tampa. So Tampa City, Florida, I can go that way. As you can see, so easy to use. And you didn't have to start from scratch. You can now see here that you're in a city town. If you then want to change it to zip code, you can do that just as easily, or go back to state and or county. We recommend that you start your search at the county level. Why? Because there's a lot of data that will be available to you at the county level, much less data, especially in the economic programs data, that will not be available at the zip code or tract levels. That is based on the privacy and confidentiality and other reasons why the data may be suppressed. There may be too few restaurants and or industry that you're looking for. And it makes more sense to us to start at the higher level to be able to see that. So now that we've seen how you can get or what geographies you have, I'd like to show you that you can also change a variable. Another very exciting thing that we added just recently is clusters. Up until this was released, there was really no way for people to use a government tool to create your own cluster. And this one allows you to have a cluster of up to 10 industries. So the way you do that is you can add an industry to an existing one that you have. So I started with consulting, and say that I want to stay with the professional services and I want to add lawyers. And you can do this with any of the industries that we have access to here, which is pretty much anyone. And say that you want to add insurance. And that's how easily you can do it. You can build up to a cluster with up to 10 industries. You can also edit the name, and you can just name it whatever you want. As easily as you can add industries, you can also delete them. Say that you decide that you don't want the insurance agencies, so you can just delete it that way, and it automatically does it for you. Once you're finished with that, the industry has been created, and then the data that you'll start to see will be reflected. The next thing that I want to show you is the dashboard that currently is hiding. So I'm going to click on a geography, and it's going to open the dashboard. So the dashboard has some pretty neat things that we have found to be beneficial for the user. One, it has the map variable that we start with. You can change all of these things here. And where you see the star, say that you want to highlight the median household income rather than the population. Or you change your mind, you want to see just the employer establishments. And the employer establishments are based on your industry cluster. So that's going to be showing what you have. The variables can also be changed. So say that you, for your search, you may not be as interested as for the percent high school degree, but instead you want something different. You may want, I don't know, some key ratios like average employment per employer. So you do that, and then that will be reflected here. So that's one of the cool things, one of the many cool things of CDB, in that you can customize your dashboard. The second thing that I want to, or the next thing that I want to show you is that you can now have another variable added. So this is what the bivariate mapping is all about. So now I want to say that I want to be talked about, see my customers, and I want to know what percentage of them are Hispanic. And that will then be reflected in the second variable here. The way that you'll see it on the map is via circles, and the key is right on your right. You can toggle between the two variables that you have, and if there is no data available or it's suppressed, it will then be a square, a red square. The next thing that we added, and this is another new thing that just came up, is the geo-ranking and time series on this map. This is very, very interesting for when you are trying to figure out what does the data look like on a multi-year basis. And another reason why is because a lot of the people that use this tool, they want to see the comparison between not only the geography they're looking at, but the geographies that are very close by in Florida. I want to now go back to Fairfax County. That Fairfax County is very close to Washington, D.C., and it makes it for a very interesting type of search. And if you wanted to then check to see what else do I want to see. And the variables that I mentioned earlier are over here. So here are the customers, that's the ACS data. The business data, that includes the economic census data and non-employer statistics and international trade. There's also the key ratios. A lot of what we've done is simplify the data in a way that you can easily understand it. For example, the zip code is not really a geography, but people understand it as a geography. It's a way that the postal system made it so that they can deliver mail easily. And so that's what we refer to, or I refer to as plain languaging the data. Everything you see here was made by design. So if there's something that you perhaps may not understand what it is, all you have to do is hover over these various things and they will explain to you what it is. And we've done that all throughout the tool So anytime that you are looking and or hovering over one of these things, it will tell you what it is. I know that when I first joined Census, I was not very well versed on everything Census. So something like this would have been phenomenal to have, because it would have allowed me to understand better and faster what it is that I was looking at. So let's continue with the map, with the interface. Here we have some buttons that are very easy to use. This, for instance, downloads the data. And you can download it via CSV, Excel, or a shapefile. So if you're interested in downloading the shapefiles, this is where you will get it. We also have reference layers. You can add the existing reference layers that we have here predetermined, or you can upload your own shapefile. I have created a lot of flyers to help you navigate this system. So if there is anything on this interface that you don't see, there's actually a site within a page within census.gov that I can show you a little bit later, where you'll find a lot of these flyers and the how-to pages that will allow you to navigate how to best use this. We also have base maps. This is something that we added just a few versions ago, and it has different options. And it all really depends on what you like to see, how you like to see your map. And I know that some people like the imagery or the dark. It really all depends on what it is that you would like to see. Unfortunately, you cannot print the map as part of your report, but you can screen grab it if you like. We can also change the transparency. So if you like to see more or less of the data, this is where you can go and change it. Throughout the tool, anytime that you see an eye, that means that there is a handout that goes with it. So if you would like to explore further what this means, there will be a flyer, and there it goes, where you can understand a little bit more about what it is and how you use it and all that good stuff. Let me see. When you are looking at the map, this is it's a great way of understanding the data, but when you're done with that, or when you want to see the report, it's very easy to just click on the button that says report, and it will take you here. What we have done here is give you the ability to configure the content. So if there are certain things that you don't want, or certain things that you don't think that you need for your report or whatever it is that you're doing, you can delete them here. For instance, here, building permits, or let's say that I'm not interested in the U.S. international trade goods. Not that I'm not interested, it's just that for what I needed, the certain components that I would not need, this is where you go and you, I guess, delete them that way. As you see, the small cluster that I created with lawyers and consulting, that's the data that you'll be seeing, a lot of that. The great thing about the report, or one of the great things about the report, is that it gives you all the data that perhaps you didn't see in the map. As you download it, you can use that for your report or your business. You can configure this as well. These are all customizable and downloadable. If you want to see the MOEs, the margins of error, you can just click on there, and then it will show you that. You can download the data here too as an Excel file, a CSV, or as a PDF. You can download the report. And next we have the socioeconomic characteristics. This is from the American Community Survey. One thing that I did not mention is that if the data is in our application programming interface, which Andy will talk a little bit about, it means that it's more than likely going to be in CBV if it's in the right release. And typically, what data you see in CBV will be the latest data that will be available at the Census Bureau. So if there is something that perhaps you're looking for historical data, this may not be the best place for it, but you can actually use another one of our tools, the data.census.gov, that will have a lot of more data. We also have the housing characteristics, and this, again, is all customizable. So any of these things you can click on, and it will update it. So if there are specific things that you wanted to highlight throughout this report, you can download, you can customize it that way. The business summary is, well, it tells you which are the industries that you have in this particular cluster. We have data on employer business, and as I said earlier, all of this, again, continue to be customizable. As you see here, at all times, you can either remove or add the MOUs, configure the content, so this continues to stay here. The other data set that I did not mention earlier, because I wanted to wait until I showed it to you here, is the consumer spending data. This is not government data. This is data that we purchased from our contractor, Esri. This is what they have for consumer spending. And this one is for the specific industries that we thought made sense to add. For example, I opened the alcoholic beverages. You can see how much people spend on average at home or away from home in beer versus wine. And if you're a business owner that wants to open a bar, it's a good thing to reference. We also have expenditures in household and apparel and expenses, and that divided by women, men, children, and so on and on we have. And every year we try to add more data sets based on the needs of the people, or at least the business case. So if there is something that you don't see here as a business owner and you reach out to us and you say, you know what, this is a great tool, but it would be better if we had these things, what we do and the process we follow is we discuss it, and if it makes business sense, and meaning if more than one person would benefit from it, then that's how the data would be added. So that is the report. We do have two versions of CBB. The one I'm showing you is the Small Business Edition. The other one is the Regional Analyst Edition. And this one is essentially has most of the same data, and the interface is just a little bit different. In the previous one, you chose an industry, but in this one, the industries are all part of the interface experience. But you can also create your own cluster in this particular one. So the same thing that I mentioned earlier, you can just repeat on this site. The big difference is that here you can actually create a region. So, for example, if I have a Fairfax County, but I want to add Arlington, so I want to essentially create my region, you can do it this way easily. You can click around. You can add the same geography type, or you can mix like city, town, and county, or zip code and city, town. Why? Because most people that we talked to while we were building this, they said, well, my region doesn't just include counties. It may include part of a county. And that's why we're able to do the creation of the region that way. You can name your region just as easily as you can name your cluster. So let's say I wanted the Nova region, the Northern Virginia region. And once you're done editing, you can just click editing. But I want to show you that in addition to doing it individually, you can also draw a rectangle. So if you want to do more than a few at a time, you can do that, and it should easily tell you, or at least give you the option to add them. So in this case, I'm adding Anne Arundel, Calvert, Charles, District of Columbia, and Prince George's County. And voila, you now have created a new region. So once you're done with it, you can use the rectangle, the circle, the polygon, or you can upload your own shape as well. When you're done editing, you have two options of creating a report. You can do a report based on one geography. So in this case, I have Fairfax County, and that would be the report that I will be creating. Or you can create a report with the multi-geographies that you just created. So this report, when I click here, Create Region Report, it will show me the totals based on those geographies that I just chose. And it does take a few minutes. Ooh. Okay. And here we are. So my region is comprised of the ones that I chose. And this report now will have the combined numbers for instance, for the population. This is the population total of this combined. Now, if you want individual, you can click on any of this, and it will create your report just for those. So you can have them individually, or you can have them combined. Those are essentially the main things that we have in CDB. The interface is very easy to use, as you all saw, and we do have those handouts. So if you go to census.gov, you can go to Explore Data, Data Tools and Apps, and this will also give you a glimpse of all the really cool free tools that we have at the Census Bureau. So if you have one afternoon to just start clicking around, I highly recommend you do that. We also have a lot of videos, previous demonstrations and webinars that were created, so that if you find something that you don't know what exactly it is or how it works, you can do that. Here is where the instructional flyers are, and these are essentially the how-to step-by-step instructions on how to do a lot of these things. So I mentioned earlier that you could upload your own data, and that can show you where that is. When you see your the variables, My Variables, this is where you can upload your own data. And for that, there's a flyer that gives you like step-by-step instructions on how you need to format your data to be able to do that. Filtering your results. So if you want to filter, I guess I skipped that part. You can filter your data easily. So if you want to have, let's say you want % under 5, say that you wanted to do a daycare, open a daycare, and you want to see what are the areas that have the highest number or highest percentage of children under 5, you can go there. You can filter it that way. You see that some of the map starts to gray out, and that is because it is showing you only the areas that have more kids under 5. If you then wanted to see how many daycares there were, you can actually go back here. You can start over, or you can delete. And sorry, the tooltips sometimes get in the way. Oh, that tooltip. You can do daycare. Yes, by demo, right? It's not pulling up. Let me see, child daycare, you can do it that way. And now it shows you that there is 1,964. Well, actually, no. Let me delete this first. Yeah, there are 351 daycare services. Now, one thing that my colleague Andy always reminds us to say is that we don't only have the employers. We always have to look at the ratios or the non-employers, because if we go back, there was 351 employers, and then we go to the non-employers, you can then see that it's 2,845 daycares. Those are the daycares that have no employees, so it may be one person that has a daycare with 3 or 4 children. And there's a lot of those in the area, as you can see. So that's how you can use the filter. Now you can see that there's 2,800 daycares. So you can see it's a very big area in this region. And when you continue to filter this, say that you want to make it even higher, oh, everything disappeared. I guess there's no area whatsoever that has that many kids. But see, that's how you can start seeing the data and how it can help you make a decision on how to open or expand a business. And with that, I think I'm going to turn it over to Andy to show us the COVID-19. If you have questions about CDB, just put them in the chat and we'll address them at the end of the presentation.
Great. Thank you so much, Barbara. So again, my name is Andy Haight. I'm an economist at the Census Bureau. And I want to, first of all, thank Barbara for such a wonderful demo of Census Business Builder. Barbara and I have sort of lived the building of Census Business Builder from its very birth in 2015. So in many ways, I sort of think of this tool as being one of my own children. I have been answering some of the questions that you all have been posing in the chat while we were going, but what I will do is at the end of the presentation, we'll go back and look at some of those previous postings, so everybody sort of gets a chance to appreciate those questions, great questions that you all asked, and what the answers were. So in my part of the presentation, I'm going to talk about two more of our data products that we have at Census. The first I'm going to talk about is our COVID-19 Interactive Data Hub, and then at the very end, we'll talk a little tiny bit about the Census Bureau's Data API. The API is really important in a number of ways. First, it exposes data users who really need to be able to download and access large parts of our data in a very user-friendly kind of a way. Much more powerful, for example, than if you tried to access all of those data in data.census.gov. So, for example, let's say I was interested in accessing data for every economic place, city, town, village, borough in the entire United States. If I tried to access that data for 30 industries, let's say, in data.census.gov, I would get a message back saying the extraction I'm trying to make is too big. And it would make me actually further narrow that research to get to something a little bit more manageable for that platform. The API, though, would allow me to go in and actually create an API call to pull all that data down. So it's a great resource, not only as a downloadable resource, but actually as a dynamically accessible resource. Census Business Builder is actually built on top of the Census Bureau's Data API. So as Barbara was browsing through the tool and the map was refreshing and data was being shown in there, as fast as you saw that was happening, that's happening because it was on coming straight from our API. None of that data is actually resident in CBB. So let me go ahead and jump out live and let's talk about COVID. Of course, no Census Bureau presentation today would not be complete without talking about COVID. So when the Census Bureau was beginning to enter the coronavirus pandemic at the start of last year, we realized that a lot of the resources that we had at Census could be very useful to users who needed information to help them understand how the pandemic might affect their state, their local communities, counties, et cetera, how the pandemic might spread, where are there vulnerable populations that perhaps may be impacted more by the pandemic than other populations. We learned, for example, fairly early on in the pandemic that older folks were being impacted by the pandemic more than younger people were. We knew that people with certain health conditions were potentially being impacted more. And Census has a lot of that source type data. So we knew that making these data accessible to an audience that may not be as familiar with the Census Bureau as we'd like them to be was really going to be very important. We had a role to play in helping communities deal with the pandemic. Now, one way of doing that would have been to just simply create a site that gave links to all the different data tools we have at the Census Bureau, tools like data.census.gov, tools like Census Business Builder, and the variety of other data tools that we have. But we thought that that was probably going to be a little mean, that perhaps what we ought to do is instead create a special data tool that pulls together selected statistics from across those different programs and puts them all in one nice, easy-to-use kind of place. The platform that we created lives under our emergency management page. So if I go to Browse by Topic and then choose Emergency Management, that'll bring us to our Emergency Management and Preparedness page, where we have information on the different hurricanes that have affected us during this past year. And if you scroll down some more, you eventually come down to that oh-so-familiar image of the coronavirus itself. Clicking on that image brings us to our coronavirus pandemic page, and right at the very top of the page is the link to the Data Hub itself. Clicking on the Data Hub brings us to this particular page. And for those of you who may have seen this before, may have experienced this, you may notice that there's some new features here. We update this platform about every month or month and a half. So there's a lot of things that have been recently added. I'm going to try to highlight some of those key features that we've added as I walk through the demo. But I would very much encourage you all to get in here and actually play with this yourself. Explore the information that's here. So at the very top of the page, we have a series of buttons that allow us to jump to specific sections of the coronavirus pandemic website, the COVID Hub. I'm going to scroll down through it the old-fashioned way. And the first thing that we come to is something called the Impact Planning Report. This is a two-page dashboard that allows me to go in and browse selected demographic and business statistics for a state or at the county level. So if I click on this Click Here link, it'll open it up into a full-size platform. We can see it maybe a little bit better, and we'll see that it automatically defaulted to New York State. If I was interested in looking at Fairfax County, Virginia, for example, as Barbara was looking at, I could scroll down to Virginia. The report would then refresh to show data for the state of Virginia, and then I can go specifically over and choose Fairfax County from the county menu and look at that information as well. The dashboard, as I said, includes demographic and business data. So, for example, here is a breakout by age of males and females who are 65 and over. Over here on the right-hand side is a section that we added just a few months ago when we realized that there were certain occupations in the U.S. that were being affected more by the pandemic because of closure orders and other kinds of effects. So we provided some key data on selected occupations by sex. So females in the blue color, males in the green color. So you can see certainly industries like education, instruction, and library services that is heavily dominated by women, versus other businesses like natural construction and maintenance fields that is more of a male-dominated sort of occupation. It is a two-page dashboard. I find a lot of users don't even know about that second page. They don't see that little drop-down arrow on the right-hand side. So this entire second page is all demographic information is available here. The statistics that are here are all from the American Community Survey. The demographic statistics are from our American Community Survey. These are for data year 2019. It's the 5-year estimate ending in 2019. Just a little sidebar mention, the 2020 ACS data has been delayed. They are currently planning a release of the ACS 5-year data for 2020 in March of next year. So kind of stay tuned on that. So you've got this great two-page dashboard, fully downloadable, fully embeddable in your own platforms. Scrolling down from the Impact Planning Report, we come to this section of the Hub that provides links to separate dashboards and the pages themselves for the 8 programs that we stood up during last year to help get a better idea of not just the potential impacts of the pandemic, but the actual impacts. The 5-year ACS data and our economic programs data would typically give us information on the past. This is what our economy looked like in 2019 prior to the pandemic. What these programs provide is data that's actually really, really timely. So, for example, if you are interested in understanding how startups in your state have been affected by the pandemic, whether there was a drop-off in the number of business formations at the start of the pandemic and whether those business formations have recovered, those types of information are available in our Business Formation Statistics program. These statistics were shown all of last year on a weekly basis, and yes, there was a huge drop-off in formations during the beginning months of the pandemic, but they have actually rebounded quite nicely, and we are now well above the formations that were happening prior to the pandemic. So businesses recovered. We also have our weekly Small Business Pulse Survey. We knew early on that small businesses likely were going to be impacted by the pandemic more than larger businesses, so we conducted a special weekly survey of small businesses. This program provides data at the state and metropolitan area levels, and it is still going on right now. We're actually just started phase 7 of the weekly Small Business Pulse Survey, and we've actually received approval to continue to conduct this small business survey for quite some time in the future, so I'm really happy about that. Down across the bottom of the program are 2 other business programs that we did. This one over here looks at how state and local governments have been impacted by the pandemic in terms of their state sales tax collections. I know in Maryland, where I live, because so few of us were driving during the pandemic, the amount of money that the state of Maryland was collecting in terms of their sales taxes on gasoline sales took a real hit, a huge drop-off in gasoline sales tax collections. Of course, now we are driving more again, and gas prices are really high, so they're back to collecting pretty good sales taxes. But these types of statistics are available on a monthly basis. And then this program over here provides state-level retail sales data. Many of you probably know that we publish a monthly retail sales survey that provides data at the national level every month. But many of you probably also then know that how each state, how the retail sector was impacted in each state varies widely from state to state. So this program provides data at the monthly basis, but by state. A few of the other programs here I want to quickly highlight. The first one I want to talk about is CRE, Community Resilience Estimates. If you learn nothing else from me during the entire part of the presentation today, is that CRE is an amazing data product. If you want to get information about how resilient your local communities are down to the census tract level, CRE is your data tool, is your data product. This is an amazing resource, so I'm so proud of my colleagues who work on that. And of course, there is a household version of the Small Business Pulse Survey that conducts collective information on how households, how people, families have been impacted by the pandemic. Scrolling down below there, we come to a series of what we call policy maps. These are map-based displays of some selected data that was shown above in that dashboard. There's 9 of them here, and again, these data are all available for you to be able to share in your own COVID platforms and in your own dashboards. Now, of course, we knew that people were going to want to be able to download all of these great data in the COVID Hub rather than just simply view them on the screen. So we have a number of data sets highlighted specifically here, and then further down on the page is a full categorical data set search that lets you access all of the data that's in the COVID Hub and download it to your local device. One thing I'm really proud of here is that these data sets are available not only in the traditional CSV or Excel file formats, but for those of you who have GIS professionals in your office, or maybe perhaps you are yourself a GIS professional, these are also available as data layers. So you could bring them right into ArcGIS. Now, in between those 2 downloadable resources, there's this whole section of the dashboard of the Hub. In January of this year, we were approached by FEMA, who had been curating a pile of data sets related to the coronavirus pandemic on the Argonne National Labs website. ANL is an amazing resource, but it is password protected, so it has a fairly limited audience who has access to that platform. And they wanted to expose, FEMA wanted to expose those 38 data sets to a larger audience. So they contacted us and asked, would you be interested in providing links to those 38 data sets on your COVID-19 Interactive Data Hub? As you can tell, we said yes, so we created an entire section of the COVID Hub that you get to by clicking on this Open Datasets page, and that will bring you right to this page where we have tiles for every one of those data sets that are out here. So, for example, if you are interested in CARES Act or PPP loan data, business closure information, those are all available here. Now, I mentioned early on in my demo that this hub is changing constantly. Just a week and a half ago, we released a brand new section for the COVID Hub on libraries. We were contacted by an association, Museum and Library Association, that asked if we'd be interested in creating a special dashboard just on public libraries. We decided to say yes. So you can go in and look at the population served by branch libraries in your local community. It's really just a wonderful resource. Now, if I scroll back up again to the very top of the COVID Hub, I'll back up there again, you will also see another section here at the very top for data equity tools. Clicking on that link then brings us to 5 data tools that we have at census.gov that we created that help highlight potentially underserved communities that we realized could be really useful to help meet the new presidential directive that was issued earlier this year that said that when organizations are distributing federal resources to their local communities, they need to be doing so in an equitable fashion. And they need to prove that they are distributing those resources equitably, that they are distributing them to not only traditionally well-served communities, but also underserved communities. Well, tools like ROAM, here in the very middle, our Response Outreach Area Mapper, that we created specifically to help us conduct the 2020 decennial census. It helped us identify potentially hard-to-count areas. Some of those same characteristics that make an area potentially hard to count could also be a characteristic that makes an area underserved. So we've created this whole hub here of 5 data tools, including, as you can see, Census Business Builder, that provide access to these tools to help you do that research to see how well or poorly your community is being served. So we have all these resources. As I said, the COVID Hub is changing constantly. I'm especially proud of the way that we've been so responsive with making this tool be very agile and very usable to a large audience. Now, in my last 2 or 3 minutes, I want to talk just very briefly about our API. All of the data in CBB come into CBB via APIs. Most of the data that is available on that COVID Hub is available on our API. And you may be wondering, okay, well, how do I get access to this API? If I go to Explore Data and I click on Developers, that'll bring me to our developers website, which is where you can access our application programming interface. And yes, we love acronyms of the Census Bureau. I kept saying API, API, API. I didn't even tell you what API stands for. One of the first key steps that you need to do when you want to access the data that's available in our API is you have to request a key. There is no cost to doing this. All we ask is for you to provide your name and contact information. So if a data set that you have downloaded, that you have accessed, if we discover some type of issue with it, we have a way of then communicating with you. We do not throttle our data users. So if you are in there downloading data, we do not limit how much you can access. And basically every single data set that is available in this developer's website is available for you to be able to download. To understand what all the data sets are and what the structure and contents of those are, we have a link over here on the left-hand side that says Available APIs. If I click on that, it's going to give me a list of each of the different programs, the major program areas at the Census Bureau that we have data available. So you can see there's some economic programs in here, some of our demographic programs like the American Community Survey. If I click on American Community Survey, it gives me more information about the years and the different types of data And then if I go ahead and click on one of these, so let's say I'm interested in looking at that ACS 5-year data like what we have in Census Business Builder, I can then click on that, and it gives me a full description of all of the tables that are available. You can see that there are multiple years worth of data. So one of you during the chat asked a question about accessing data that we don't have in Census Business Builder, some of that historical data. Here's where you could access a lot of that information. And then down below here, I think is the most important part of this page. It gives us information about what is an example or a sample call. It gives me 3 ways of accessing all the variables that are in that particular data set, that particular data table. Those variable IDs are critically important. You have to define the variable ID when you go to pull the data. So, for example, in this example call, B01001 is the data variable for total population. I happen to know that, so it'll say that I have that memorized, but that is actually the basic table ID for the total population statistic. There's also some technical documentation, more examples of sample calls and things like that, and information about the levels of geography that are provided in this particular data set. Does the data just have information at the national, state, and county levels, or does it go all the way down to block group? That type of information is available here. You do need your own API key. You can see this is where you would insert it into the sample call, and then it allows you to go in and actually pull that data down. Now, this is certainly one key way of accessing the list of all the different APIs that are available. You may have also noticed here at the very top something called the Discovery tool. If I click on that link, it's then going to give me 3 ways, again, of looking at the Discovery tool. I happen to like the HTML file format. So if I click on that, now we get a list of every single data set, individual data set that is available in the API. If I scroll all the way down to the very bottom of this list, we would see that there are 797 data sets that are currently available in our API. I highlight the word currently because this number was about 400 about a year ago. So we keep adding more data sets based upon feedback that we get from our users. Some of these data sets are single point in time, single year, for example, data sets. Other ones that are in here are time series data sets. So like these international trade ones that I'm looking at right now are all time series data sets. They allow me to go in and actually pull the information down on a monthly basis for multiple years. So it's a really fantastic way of going in and accessing all of these data. You can see how many there are. One thing that I really like about this particular way of viewing is in one place for that one data set, I can understand the geographies that are covered, the data variables that are included in that data set, the different groupings. So, for example, our business data are grouped by not just geography, but by industry, by NAICS code, and by employment size range. These county business patterns data set have data grouped by employment size ranges and legal form of organizations. So those are those different groups. A couple of different examples, some documentation on this particular data set, and then finally the base URL that you would use to access all of the data from this County Business Patterns 1986 data set. So this is a fantastic resource. I know some people have told me that they're sort of intimidated or maybe a little bit scared about APIs. I promise you it's not quite as scary as it may sound. For those of you who are familiar with just simply downloading data from a platform like data.census.gov, it's really not much different than that, and you can get full access to the whole data set rather than just the limited pieces of the data that you can get from data.census.gov due to its limitations on the platform. There are a lot of other resources here. There's forums that we have. You can join mail lists to get information as we add more and more information. and even some guidance on some tips and tricks and best practices in how to access these data. We have a lot of users that use this API as a download resource, but we also have a lot that are accessing it dynamically, like the way we do in Census Business Builder. So that was a very, very quick walkthrough of our COVID-19 Data Hub and our Census Bureau Data API. In the last couple of minutes today, we want to go ahead and see if we can take some questions. So I'm going to go ahead and go back over to our chat and see if I can actually access that. And let me just go ahead and actually stop sharing my screen. Actually, here, stop sharing it for right now so I can get back over to the chat. And let's see if we have any particular questions. So just looking sort of bottom up, I see one of you asked the question about, are there any resources for someone that has never used an API? Yes. There on the developers page, there's some really nice little tutorials available for those of you who maybe have never tried to use an API. If you can type a URL into a browser, you can use an API. It's not that scary. I have figured it out. Takes a little tiny bit of information available, before you get sort of used to the sort of the best ways of accessing it, but it's really pretty simple. Okay, scrolling up a little tiny bit, I did see one of our attendees asked about a data set called LODES, L-O-D-E-S. LODES is one of our longitudinal employer household dynamics programs, and this one provides information on origination and destination statistics. So what I mean by that is, if you wanted to find information about where people live and where they work, that's the type of connections between where people live and work. That's kind of the data that are available in the LODES data set. Currently, the LODES data are only available on our LEHD, our Longitudinal Employer Household Dynamics website. They're only available for download on that page. However, I do happen to know that they are actually working on getting the LODES data into the Census Bureau's data API. The quarterly workforce indicators data are already in the API. In fact, that's exactly how we've got the QWI data incorporated into Census Business Builder, is because the QWI data, quarterly workforce indicators data, are already in there, but the LODES data currently are not. I will tell you it's going to be a little while. I know they're working on it actively right now. It probably, fingers and toes crossed, will be sometime next year, perhaps, that we get that activated, but the LODES data will eventually be there. Scrolling up a little bit further. Okay, let's see here. Scroll up a little further in the chat. Okay. So I saw a question that came in. I see a question here about, is there additional search features on veterans? And it's a great question, very timely question, given the time of the year that we're at. And yes, we actually do. So we publish information on veterans in essentially two places at the Census Bureau. Our demographic programs, like the American Community Survey, publish data on veterans themselves, How many are there, where they live, what's their demographics, socioeconomic characteristics, et cetera. So veterans as a group of people, there are demographic information available in the American Community Survey that are available there. However, you may also be interested in data on veteran-owned businesses. Now, the ACS does not publish data on veteran-owned businesses, but we have a program in Econ, in the part of the Census Bureau that Barbara and I work in, that does. The Annual Business Survey is a program that we conduct every year that publishes data on the race, ethnicity, gender, and veteran status of the business owner. So if you wanted to know, for example, how many veteran-owned businesses are there in Fairfax County, Virginia, you would have that data. If you wanted to know how many of those are female veteran-owned, you would have that data. If you wanted to know how many of those were Black veteran-owned, so all those dimensions, gender, race, ethnicity, and veteran status, are cross-tabbed with each other in this annual business survey. Every year we publish data at the state level. Every 5 years we publish data down to the county and city levels in ABS. It is a great resource to see how important certain types of businesses are to many of these types of groups. So great question. Let's see here. So in Barbara's portion of the presentation, she was talking about the ability to be able to aggregate data in Census Business Builder Regional Analyst Edition by groupings of geographies. And in that tool, you could aggregate data by tract, for example, to create a group of tracts. One of the attendees asked questions, can reports be generated for specific parcels in a project area? The short answer is no. We don't publish parcel-level data in our data tools and in our data products. But you could, if parcels end up coinciding with census tracts, for example, then you could look at those at the tract level data. But there's some of it available there. Let's see here. Barbara, did you see any particular questions that you want to chime in on?
No, I think just looking at my screen, looks like we've answered all of the questions. I know there were questions about what it was, what's the API, what's next. And yes, a lot of the times, Andy and I and others from the census, we forget to actually say and or spell out what all of these acronyms mean. And it's on us. So we've been more conscious of doing that a little bit better. So the CBB tool was actually done that way to have less of that confusion. And so the tooltips in CBB help a great deal. But we do know that there's a lot of other tools and at Census that are not there.
I did see, Barbara, one question that came in sort of late in the game. Actually, I have two questions I'll pick on. One of the users asked some questions specifically about that, sort of building on the point that I made about the loads data about where people live and where they work. The loads data is based upon where they live and work. This user asked questions on where people live and where they go to the doctor, which is sort of a really sort of intriguing connection. Short answer, no, we don't have data that links where people live and where they go to the doctor. But what you could look at is the ratio of people per doctor's office in a particular area to look at how many people on average each doctor's office in a particular area serve. That's actually a very common use case in Census Business Builder of people thinking about opening a business and they're considering maybe a couple of locations, and one of those locations is one where there's 500 people per daycare center and one where there's 5,000 people per daycare center, children per daycare center. Well, of course, that second location would be a better location. But that's a really intriguing thing. That would actually require us to collect from a doctor such detailed information about who their customers are that we could link to our demographic data that would probably be problematic. But really an intriguing question. And finally, I will just say, one of you did ask a question about publishing data related to social emotional learning. To be quite frank, I'm not quite positive what that really means, but let me go ahead and put my email address in the chat. If you want to follow up with me after the webinar today, I can perhaps do a little bit more digging for you and see if I can figure that out. I suspect that I'm going to have to send you to HHS or the CDC for something along those lines, or the National Center for Education Statistics, for example. But let me go ahead and put that in there. Put my email address in there, and in the chat so you have that. I also want to make sure I share our screen here at the very end, Barbara. Let me go back to sharing so we can bring up I guess we didn't have it. Never mind. I was about ready to say we could go ahead and share our email address and phone numbers there. But anyway, I just put it in the chat.
Okay, great. Awesome. Thank you, Barbara and Andy, for the excellent presentations on census data tools. I was monitoring the chat, and these tools, as Barbara mentioned, they are free, so when you have time, it certainly will assist in conducting research, contributing to your business plans, or helping you to make business decisions. So I saw some information asking about trade data. So we invite you to join our webinar on Thursday, where we will specifically talk about the trade data tools on Schedule B, Global Market Finder, USA Trade Online, as well as the Trade API. So thank you for joining today. Please complete the evaluation. That link has been provided in the chat. It is a safe and secure site as you exit, so we'd love to hear from you. So please provide us your feedback. And as you exit, we want to just say thank you for joining today. If there are no additional questions, this completes our webinar. Thank you.
That concludes today's conference. Thank you for participating. You may disconnect at this time.